Haribol, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. On the auspicious occasion of Gaura Purnima 2019, I wanted to read this article, Gaura Purnima with Srila Prabhupada. It's a beautiful picture of Srila Prabhupada. And it's by His Grace Srutakirti Das. I was fortunate to be with Srila Prabhupada in 1975 when Prabhupada was there in Mayapur for Gaura Purnima in March. And what I wanted to try to do, although it's not possible to do, but I'm going to try anyway, to give just a little bit of an idea of being with Prabhupada and some of the things that Srila Prabhupada was seeing. Not that I know how he was seeing them, but what he was seeing. Because what he did was he traveled around the world in 2 months at the time. He left Juhu, Bombay, which was a very pet project of Srila Prabhupada's, that he worked so hard to develop. It is a very wonderful project in Bombay. And he left there June 24th, and he was back in Mayapur in less than 2 months. In 2 months, Prabhupada traveled around the world, and he went to approximately 14 temples in that time. Now, what for me was significant was seeing Srila Prabhupada go from one temple to the next, knowing that he was going to be in Mayapur for Gaura Purnima, and seeing so many things. Because what has happened is he had left Bombay and he flew into Japan, where he stayed for a few days. And then he went to the Hawaii temple, New Navadvip. Hawaii temple was the very first temple in the West. Prabhupada named New Navadvip. They were the first temple to have Panchatattva deities outside of India. So this place is still there. Panchatattva is still there. Prabhupada's quarters are still there. So he spent time there. Prabhupada said it was one of his favorite places. He described 2 favorite places. Sometimes he described other favorite places, but he said he liked Juhu and Hawaii very much because they had coconut trees, just like here. So Prabhupada was very fond of dab, in brackets coconut drink. He would say, "Dab, give me dab." So after going to Hawaii and then Los Angeles, he started a very amazing tour. And this tour began to take him around Mexico and South America and then through North America. But what I say that was very significant, I hadn't seen it so much before, was Prabhupada's mood when he was in the temple room. Now you can try to imagine, this is not 2008, this was 1975. Prabhupada had spent 10 years spreading Krishna consciousness around the world. Previous to that, there was no chanting of Hare Krishna anywhere outside of India. There was no understanding about Lord Chaitanya, Panchatattva, Krishna, all these things didn't exist. He spent 10 years planting this seed of Krishna consciousness everywhere in the world. And now we may take these things for granted. It is so easy, it is so nice. Everywhere you go, you can see Krishna devotees. You can see the form of the Lord. But in 1975, by this time, there were over 100 temples all around the world, and Prabhupada was visiting these temples, some of them for the first time. And when he went to Mexico City, there were hundreds of devotees chanting. When Prabhupada was giving class, the crowd was like this. There were hundreds of people chanting Hare Krishna in Mexico. And I felt very strongly that Prabhupada was becoming overwhelmed every time he saw Lord Chaitanya's mercy prevalent. He could see it in the numbers of people chanting, and in each temple he would sit down on the Vyasasan and he would look onto the altar, and there on the altar was Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda standing there smiling and just distributing love of Godhead everywhere. This was Prabhupada's success. And Prabhupada would sometimes become overwhelmed in ecstatic feelings, seeing devotees in the Western world, the land of so many mlechas. And there I remember one day, one lady, an elderly lady, she asked in Spanish. So she asked at the end, there were questions and answers. So she spoke, and Hridayananda Maharaj translated. And she said, because Prabhupada was speaking how important it is at the time of death to remember Krishna, and she said, Srila Prabhupada, what if at the time of death we remember you? So Maharaj, he translated, and Prabhupada, he just smiled a little and said, in brackets, soft and humble tone, that's alright. So when I heard that, I was very, very happy. To this day, it makes me very, very happy to know we just remember Srila Prabhupada even. If we could be so lucky to be serving Srila Prabhupada to the time of our last breath, that we can remember him, that would be alright. We have Prabhupada's guarantee. So then he went from Mexico City and he went to Caracas, Venezuela. And he had never been in Caracas, Venezuela, but his disciples were there. There were hundreds of them chanting Hare Krishna in 1975. So many wonderful devotees were there. I had lived there for 6 months, the year previous to that, so I knew many of the devotees, and I was very happy to go back. But as soon as Prabhupada sat down, he looked onto the altar, and who was there? Gauranga, Nityananda, standing on the altar, just showing their blessings to everyone. Prabhupada just looked at them, and already there were tears in his eyes, because Prabhupada didn't think, I am spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. That was not how he thought. He thought Lord Chaitanya is so merciful. So he spoke like that. Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, they're so merciful that they come here to distribute love of God. So as he went from place to place and he is approaching Mayapur, he was just so overwhelmed to see that Krishna consciousness was going all around the world. Of course, he was giving credit to his disciples. He was giving credit to his spiritual master, to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he was just a humble servant, but we knew, we could understand it was Prabhupada that planted the seed. He watered the seed and he cultivated all of these seeds all around the world. With his books, he continues to do that. So he was going to each place. When he was in Caracas, he was in the room one day with the devotees giving darshan. It was in the evening and there were mosquitoes. Like in Mayapur, we have a few mosquitoes here. So there they also had some mosquitoes, and one of the devotees was looking and he was seeing the mosquitoes were bothering him. But Prabhupada didn't seem to have any mosquitoes. And he said, Prabhupada, do mosquitoes, they know you are a pure devotee and they're not biting you. And Prabhupada laughed. He said, yes, here the mosquitoes have respect for me, but in Vrindavan they have no such respect. Once in Vrindavan, he rang the bell. It was 2 o'clock in the morning and he was trying to translate, and he would never ever ring the bell while I was taking rest. He would let me rest, but he rang the bell, and when I went into his room, he was sitting in center of the room, just sitting there chanting, and he was never sitting just on the floor. He was always behind his desk, translating, speaking, reading, and I came in and offered obeisances. I was asleep and I just looked up and he said, the mosquito, it has dethroned me. But what he was bothered by was, he said, it is preventing me from doing my translation work. So it was not that he was just sitting and the mosquito was bothering, but was preventing him from doing his service. So that's when we got the mosquito net, first time. Just like here behind this seat, we had a big mosquito net around Prabhupada every night. We would put around him, so when he would come in to translate, there was no disturbance. So from Caracas, Prabhupada continued on, and then he went to Miami Temple. And in Miami he stayed for just 1 day and 1 night. And when he arrived, again hundreds of American boys and girls jumping up and down, chanting Hare Krishna. We were jumping up and down because Prabhupada was right in front of us, chanting, playing kartals and chanting, encouraging us. Sometimes Prabhupada would look and he would go like this, nodding, and then that way he would make you bounce up and down just by his head going like this, and then you would just jump up and down, and he would encourage that dancing. Dance for Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. Again he looked on the altar, and Lord Chaitanya was there, and Lord Nityananda was there. And immediately Prabhupada starting speaking about how merciful he said it was Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. He could see how merciful was Srila Prabhupada to come to the West and give us this Hare Krishna mantra, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. And as he was talking to the devotees, so personal, and he said, maybe in the future you will worship Radha Krishna. He said, but then you have to be very careful, because with Radha Krishna worship you cannot make any offenses. He said, Lord Chaitanya is very merciful, he will not even accept offenses. Imagine how merciful the Lord is, how merciful the Supreme Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He doesn't even accept your offenses, but he said, Radha Krishna, you must be very careful. But if you get Radha Krishna or not, that's okay, because Radha Krishna is there within Lord Chaitanya. So then he went on and spoke some more. In brackets, see folio, arrival address, Miami, February 25th, 1975. So then it got sweeter. Each place he was going to, it just got more and more sweet. So then he went to Atlanta in the state of Georgia. And at Atlanta, when Prabhupada arrived, it was a small temple room. And again hundreds of devotees. And Prabhupada went and he sat down on the Vyasasana, and the devotees are just crying, laughing, dancing, jumping. And then Prabhupada began to speak. It was not a big temple room, so Lord Chaitanya nor Lord Nityananda were not so far away. And when Prabhupada began to speak, he said, so we have just come, and he described, we were just Los Angeles, and then Mexico, and then Caracas. Then he looked at me, and I said Miami, and he said, yes, Miami, and now we are here. So he was tracing it everywhere. He had been seeing the devotees, the Vaishnavas, he had created everywhere in the world. And then he said, so your temple is the best. And all the devotees just went into ecstasy. And then he said, I'm going to read this. This was his lecture that day. It won't take long. So Prabhupada was looking at the deities, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, and he said, so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is very kind. Paramakaruna Pahadwijana. Two lords, Nitai Gaura Chanda, Nityananda Prabhu and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, as he was speaking, he was becoming choked up. He wasn't just speaking. Prabhupada was expressing his emotions about Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. He was completely overwhelmed, and his eyes were filled with tears. And then he said, they have appeared just to reclaim the fallen souls of this age. So they are more kind than Krishna. Krishna, he is also very kind. He comes to deliver, but Krishna demands that first of all surrender. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu even does not demand surrender, he is so kind. And he couldn't speak, but he continued. So take shelter of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and be happy. Thank you very much. And at that time he just closed his eyes, and as he closed his eyes, tears just shot out of his eyes. I was sitting right there, in brackets indicates to the front, and devotees were everywhere. It was the most amazing of all the times I was with Prabhupada. It was the most amazing thing, so he just shut his eyes and the room was completely quiet. Prabhupada didn't move, no one moved, so I don't even think anyone was breathing, because we didn't want to make one sound, because we could understand Prabhupada was in complete ecstasy. And some minutes went by, and then finally Prabhupada lifted his head and said, "Chant Hare Krishna." In brackets, see folio, arrival address, Atlanta, February 28, 1975. So then the devotees, they began chanting, and then Prabhupada gradually began playing the karatals. And many wonderful things happened there. We don't have time. We just have a short time to speak. But one thing I have to tell you that happened there. As I said, Prabhupada was something I had not experienced so much before. He just had this ecstasy that it just began escaping from him. He was always in control of that, but it was just happening. So every night I would massage Prabhupada in his room there. For 3 days he stayed there, and his quarters are still there, just as when he stayed there. So as Prabhupada was lying down in bed, and he had his head up a little bit on the pillow, and I was rubbing his legs and rubbing his feet. So the massage was going on for 10 or 15 minutes. Prabhupada's massage in the evening was the most personal, intimate tie to be with Prabhupada. The lights were out, the room was dark, there would be some light from wherever, and no one ever entered Prabhupada's room while he received his evening massage. No one ever came into Prabhupada's quarters. So it was just him and his servant. So as I was massaging, Prabhupada all of a sudden said, "I like the cowherd voice very much." Then he would speak. In the evening it was nothing but nectar, always nectar. So just continued, never stopped massaging. And he was looking at the picture, big painting on the wall, at the foot of his bed, and he was just looking into it. So I looked and I realized he was looking, and this picture was Krishna and Balaram. They were just young boys, 8 years old, and with them there were thousands of cowherd boys and calves, and they were just in the forest of Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada was looking at that. So I am massaging. And then he said every day Krishna and Balaram, they would go into the forest in Vrindavan. Before they would go, their mothers would make lunch, prepare tiffins for them. I'm just shaking my head. Prabhupada is speaking very softly. Prabhupada is just there, right there inside that scene, and he is speaking about it. Then when Prabhupada talked, he would just bring you, he would just transport you right there. So he said Krishna's mother Yashoda, she would make very nice tiffin. In it there would be puri, halava, kachori, laddu, and the other cowherd boys. Their mothers were not so opulent, so their tiffins would have chapati, rice, sabji like that. And then he said, then they would go and they would play all day, and they didn't have the cows. They are just little boys, so they would have the calves. The calves were with them. And then finally they would stop for lunch. Sometimes one of the cowherd boys would steal Krishna's lunch and begin throwing it around. They would play keep away with Krishna. I'm just massaging the whole time. He said finally the cowherd boys, they would throw their lunch to Krishna, and they would sit down with his lunch, and they would eat puri, halava, kachori and laddu, and Krishna would sit with them, and he would eat rice, chapati and sabji. He was smiling so brightly. And then he stopped, and I'm still massaging. Then he said, I just want to go back to the spiritual world and eat kachori and laddu with Krishna. Then he closed his eyes and didn't say anything more, and I just kept massaging. So it was something, very rare experience, that I could see Prabhupada was just so much ecstasy, seeing everyone becoming Krishna conscious all over the world. I'll continue on. He went to Dallas, New York, England, Tehran, and then he came here Calcutta and Mayapur in time for Gaura Purnima. So it was a very interesting arrival. He went into his room, which was just finished in his quarters here in the Lotus building. Jayapataka Maharaj was there, Bhavananda, Acharya Rishi from Iran, myself, a few other devotees. Prabhupada came in and he was very happy. He saw his quarters, the breeze going through, and immediately Prabhupada said, "So the devotees all are situated very nicely, they are all getting milk." Prabhupada always cared so much that we were taken care of, every one of us. And then Bhavananda said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada, everyone has nice facility, nice place to stay. Prabhupada, it is your mercy." Prabhupada said, "No, it is not my mercy, it is the mercy of Bhaktivinoda Thakur." And then Bhavananda said, "Prabhupada, you've made such a nice place. There is nice breezes, nice verandas." Prabhupada said, "I had some idea, but Krishna, he provided all the intelligence." So again he deflected these compliments as they were coming. So then Prabhupada said, "It is the mercy of Srila Prabhupada," meaning his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And then again the devotees said, "Prabhupada, it's all your mercy that we are here." And Prabhupada said, "Bhaktivinoda Thakur predicted that someone would come who would spread Krishna consciousness all around the world. Perhaps I'm that person." The only time Prabhupada ever said perhaps or maybe is when he would give us a little hint of who he was. Then he would say maybe, like he said, "Perhaps my father knew," because his father would do anything he wanted and his father would give him. So he said, "Perhaps my father knew." But that's all he would say. He wouldn't go into any detail. He wouldn't glorify himself. You just had to understand. So in that way he said, "Perhaps I'm that person." And as soon as he said it, as said, "So have you planted banana trees here in Mayapur?" He completely changed the subject. He wouldn't even allow us to discuss it. He started talking about planting banana trees and mating a Jersey cow with a Surabi cow. He just went off into all these practical details that he wanted done here in Mayapur. So he wouldn't let us go, but we knew, everyone knows, and we should tell everyone around the world that Srila Prabhupada is that person that Bhaktivinoda Thakur predicted would bring people from all over the world. In 5 minutes, if you walk from one building to the next, you will hear 20 different language in the course of 5 minutes. So Prabhupada is that person who brought everyone here. And he is seeing Lord Chaitanya doing this. So Lord Chaitanya, he sent Srila Prabhupada here. We all know this. This is not difficult to understand. So the next day Prabhupada goes into the temple room and again he sees Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda on the altar, and again he began speaking about how merciful they are. And in the course of the lecture, again Prabhupada went into ecstasy on the Vyasa-san and just couldn't say another word. He just stopped. There was complete silence. Hundreds of devotees, everyone from the West, 500 devotees and 3 or 4 Bengali devotees, 3 or 4 devotees from Bombay. But everyone was from America, South America, Europe. He had brought them all here. So then, behind Prabhupada, there was a sannyasi, and Prabhupada was completely quiet. He could hear as they say a pin drop. You could hear as they say a pin drop. And no one was even chanting on their beats, because their beat would make noise. This is how appreciative we were to be in that atmosphere of ecstasy. We all felt various degrees of ecstasy because it was flowing from Srila Prabhupada. But all of a sudden, this devotee, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, and he started the kirtan, and Prabhupada opened his eyes. So the kirtan went on. So then we had kirtan. So then after the kirtan, I'm going up to the room, up the stairs into Prabhupada's quarters. Brahmananda was his secretary, and Prabhupada went inside. Brahmananda Maharaj and myself, there was this big discussion outside with different sannyasis, GBCs, temple president, about what had happened at the kirtan. So some devotees were saying we should have just been quiet. What are we doing? And why did he start chanting? Prabhupada was in ecstasy. We should just be quiet. And there was another group that said, no, chanting Hare Krishna is always correct. We should chant Hare Krishna, that's okay. So that diversity was there, different opinions coming from different devotees. So Brahmananda, as a secretary, what else could we do? He said, we'll ask Prabhupada. So Brahmananda Maharaj and myself, we went into Prabhupada's room and we offered obeisances. And here is Prabhupada. He is sitting on a cushion on the floor in his room and in Mayapur, as he did everywhere in the world. He just sat on a cushion on the floor with a little desk in front of him. So he is just sitting there and he is chanting japa. We come in and offer obeisances and Prabhupada looks up. He hasn't called us, so he is looking with an inquisitive face. I just sat behind him because I thought it was all rather funny. Brahmananda is trying to think of what to say and he says, Prabhupada, do you know this morning in the temple room you went into ecstasy and Prabhupada is just looking at him. So he said, we are having a discussion and we are trying to understand when you go into ecstasy on the Vyasasana, what should we do? Prabhupada is looking at him and he said so humbly, I don't do that very often. I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking this is really just bizarre. Then Brahmananda said, yes, Prabhupada, but like this morning when it happened and that devotee was chanting Hare Krishna, started kirtan and chanting, so, and before he could say anything, Prabhupada said, it's not such an important thing. Yes, but if it happens, what should we do? Should we just sit there or should we chant? Prabhupada said, chant Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhupada. So that was the conclusion. Of course, I was very much in favor of just sitting there, even if it meant we had to sit there for hours. It was just so wonderful seeing Prabhupada do that in our present, expose himself in that way. It's something so rare, such rare moments in being with Prabhupada. So as I said, the discussion was there. So many other discussions, but I'm going to have to stop so Maharaj can speak. What I want to offer was that these differences, so much diversity, we spoke here about unity and diversity. So as many disciples as there are, so many GBCs as there are, so many different ideas how to spread Krishna consciousness, how to relate to one another, how to do so many other things, how to care for each other. The one thing I see that gives us unity still to this day is Srila Prabhupada. We cannot be unified. Aside, thank you. Maharaj said I can speak until 10:30. It is Prabhupada that unifies us. It's always Prabhupada that unifies us. As soon as you go into the temple room, we offer obeisances to Srila Prabhupada on the Vyasasana. Then we greet the deities and we offer our obeisances again to Srila Prabhupada on the altar. So he is there for all of us. He is not exclusive. This is his society. He is the founder Acharya and he has so many disciples. He has empowered to give initiation, to increase the generation. But we all have the ability to taste the nectar that comes from Srila Prabhupada's lotus mouth. When I become his servant, every day I would go into Prabhupada's room so many times. Every day and from the beginning, sometimes I would go into Prabhupada's room and he would be reading his books. And he would read his books and you would get the same sensation as if we were reading his books. He didn't have a pen or paper. He wasn't editing them to see if this is right. That was right. He was relishing these books. So one day I went in, I being his servant for just a month in 1972. I was 21 years old. He was reading Bhagavad Gita. At this time there was only half a dozen books. First Canto Srimad Bhagavatam was there, Nectar of Devotion, Krishna book, Bhagavad Gita as it is, and Prabhupada was reading Bhagavad Gita. And he rang his bell, so I went in and I offered obeisances and sat up, and he is holding his book. He had his reading glasses on and he just looks at me, and I said, yes, Prabhupada, and he said, if you just read this one book, you can become Krishna conscious. Yes, Prabhupada. You don't have to read so many books, hundreds of books. This book is so nice, this Bhagavad Gita as it is so nice. If you just read this one book and understand, you can become Krishna conscious. Yes, Prabhupada. You don't have to read so many books. And then he put his head down and just continued reading Bhagavad Gita. That was it. He was finished. That's why he called me in. When I was with Prabhupada, most of the time, he would talk to me. I never felt like he was talking to me. I just thought he was speaking. I don't know why, because he was always talking to me because I was right there and he was talking to me very personally. But because I was very foolish and I didn't get that, but I felt like he was on the Vyasa-san giving class. That's how I felt many times, that he was giving a lecture and he was just talking about Krishna consciousness. Not that he was directing it to me, but of course he was. So anyway, I offered obeisances and left. So several months go by, and one afternoon Prabhupada's in Los Angeles and he rings the bell. So I run into the room and offer obeisances and sit up. He is sitting behind his desk and he is reading Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, translated and commentary by Srila Prabhupada. And he is reading it, his book. Prabhupada is reading his book, everything he told us to do. That's what he was doing. He was reading his own books. So I came in and he just looked at me and he said, this Nectar of Devotion is so nice. If you just read this one book, you can become Krishna consciousness. You can become Krishna conscious. I'm speechless. I'm just nodding my head, not even saying anything. This book is so nice. Prabhupada is reading it and he's relishing his book like I don't understand at all to this day. Then he said, you don't have to read any other book, just read this book. He knew I wasn't reading, so he kept trying to get me to read something. He said, just this book. If you read it, you can become Krishna conscious. It is so wonderful. Everything is in here. Just read this one book, he kept saying. You don't have to read anything else, just this book. Yes, Prabhupada. And then he put his head down and then I could understand, now I should go. So I offered obeisances and I left. Another year goes by. Prabhupada is reading every day, every other day. He's translating every day, every morning. He's reading every day, doing bhajans in his room, playing harmonium. He's a devotee, Krishna's very dear devotee and friend. So another year goes by. I've been with Prabhupada for over 2 years. He rings his bell and I go in and I offer obeisances. And he has his reading glasses on and he is reading Krishna book. And he looked up at me and everyone knows what he said. This book is so nice. If you just read this book, you can become Krishna conscious. Just by reading this one book, you don't have to read so many books, dozens and dozens of books, hundreds of books. Just this book, Krishna book, is so wonderful. If you just read it and try to understand, you will become Krishna conscious. Yes, Prabhupada. You don't have to read so many books, just this book. He's showing me the book, just me. I'm sitting there 3 feet in front of him and he's just giving me this opportunity. He said, you don't have to read any other book, just read this one book. And he kept looking at me. He didn't put his eyes down. He just kept looking at me and I'm going, yes, Prabhupada. And he said, you don't even have to read the whole book, just one chapter. If you just read one chapter of this book, you can become Krishna conscious. Yes, Prabhupada, I didn't know what to do, but he kept looking at me. He didn't put his head down like the 2 other times in the past 2 years. He kept looking at me and he looked up and he said, you don't even have to read the whole chapter, just one page. And he put his finger up and down. Just one page. If you just read one page, you can become Krishna conscious. Yes, Prabhupada. And he is looking at me. He didn't take his eyes off me. He kept looking and he said, you don't even have to read the whole page. Just one line. Just one line of this book. If you just read it, you can become Krishna conscious. You can be Krishna conscious. You don't even have to read the whole line, just one word. If you pick up this book and read just one word, you can be Krishna conscious, because Krishna is in every word. Hari Bol. In brackets, applause. So then he puts his eyes down and he continues reading. So this is what Srila Prabhupada has given us. Imagine he has us, this book, Krishna book, Bhagavad Gita, all of Srimad Bhagavatam, all of Chaitanya Charitamrita, so many books he has given us to read. This is Srila Prabhupada's legacy. This is where Srila Prabhupada lives for all of us. We all have this ability, just like I was sitting there. This is what Srila Prabhupada wants from every one of us. Sit down, read these books very carefully. You can become Krishna conscious. If you can't read all of them, just pick one book and sit down with it and become Krishna conscious. In an airplane, he was reading his Bhagavad Gita as it is, and he turned to Pradyumna and said, "Who reads their own books? Who do you know who reads their own books? No one reads their own books." Then when an author makes a book, he puts it down. He reads other people's books. He doesn't read his own book once it's finished. But here I'm reading this Bhagavad Gita as it is. Why? He was on the airplane going to the next temple, and we looked. He said, "Because these are not my words, they're Krishna's words." So this is Srila Prabhupada. Everything he gave us is just coming from Krishna, directly in his books. I want to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to speak. I want to thank Jayapataka Maharaj, Bhakti Purushottam Maharaj, all of my God brothers, God sisters, all of the assembled devotees to be able to come here in Mayapur. This is the first class I've ever given in Sridham Mayapur. So I was so happy that it could happen today. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Hare Krishna, and so it's a nice article. And only one thing that I don't agree with is that Srila Prabhupada has empowered these disciples to initiate people on their own behalf. That's not true. Srila Prabhupada gave the order to initiate on Srila Prabhupada's behalf. He said on my behalf. So, but I think that Prabhupada cheated his own disciples, because he knew they were demons and they would take his position after he left the planet. So he installed his murti in every ISKCON temple. Even before he left his body, he put his books everywhere. So all the ISKCON devotees, they are also reading Srila Prabhupada's books. And these false GBC gurus, they only think that they initiate the people. But in reality, the initiation is only coming from Prabhupada. These ISKCON gurus have no power. They're not pure devotees. They only do the fire sacrifice, and then they cheat the new next generation and tell them that they are the guru. But in actuality, the initiation is coming only from Prabhupada. And I think Prabhupada knew all this, what was going to happen in ISKCON. So he had to cheat his own disciples. And it's only a problem for the next generation, because they have to accept these false gurus. But what can be done? The spiritual potency still seems to be coming through the books and through the murtis of Srila Prabhupada. So let's see what's going to happen. Srila Prabhupada is certainly in control. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is in control. So right now all we can do is wait how they're going to react to this whole situation. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Happy Gaura Purnima.